In the way this video builds its case, 2025 is not described as a year of a few unrelated incidents. It is presented as a year in which multiple pressure lines surfaced at the same time. The narrator begins with the widest frame. Conflict continued across several regions, and flashpoints were not confined to a single continent. From there, the video stresses a key distinction between war and rumors of war. War is something people can see in images and numbers. Rumors, on the other hand, keep the political atmosphere and public psychology constantly tense because they suggest the possibility of sudden escalation, especially when paired with nuclear warnings. In this narrative frame, Matthew 24 is used as a way of naming that condition, a period in which instability is no longer an exception, but the baseline. From that general backdrop, the video narrows its focus to Israel and Jerusalem as a magnet for global attention. The central point is presented plainly. Conflicts involving Israel tend to trigger stronger international reactions because they quickly become stories of diplomacy, protests, resolutions, and media battles. Zechariah 12 appears here as a metaphor for Jerusalem's weight in international perception, an issue many actors want to engage. Yet, the more they engage, the more pressure accumulates. The video also brings in the coastal Gaza context in 2025 to illustrate that some developments are not only exchanges of fire, but shifts in boundaries and territorial control, which cause the international reaction cycle to repeat again and again. This approach does not try to prove right or wrong on every detail. It concentrates on the feeling of pressure build, escalation cycles happening closer together, with shorter pauses. Against that pressure build, the video introduces a scenario-style forecast for 2026. It calls 2025 the stage of birth pains, the first contractions, meaning a signaling phase rather than an ending. From that image, 2026 is positioned as a higher-risk year for three reasons within the video's own logic. First, the flashpoints do not cool down. They stack on top of one another, producing a compounding effect. Second, major tension corridors in Europe, the Middle East, and the Asia-Pacific are described as entering heightened alert at the same time. Third, when many actors operate in worst-case prevention mode, a small incident can be enough to push events past a threshold. For that reason, the opening does not claim with certainty that 2026 will be the final point. It builds an argument instead. 2026 may be the year when the tension chains of 2025 move from signs into eruption. That is why the video chooses to move forward with a countdown structure, meant to connect the pieces it believes are pointing toward 2026. In the video, Jerusalem is not treated as a simple location. It is framed as a magnet, where even smaller conflicts can trigger outsized reactions. The reason is not size or resources. The reason is symbolism and history. When tensions involving Israel rise, the reaction cycle often spreads beyond the region very quickly. Governments have to speak. International organizations are pulled in. Protests appear in many major cities, and the media updates continuously, turning the dispute into a globalized issue almost instantly. The video uses the image of a cup of trembling to describe that phenomenon, not to prove a single detail, but to name the condition, an issue where the more parties try to intervene, the harder it becomes to find a shared exit. From that frame, the video points toward 2026 through a fairly direct logic. If Jerusalem remains the focal point, then the risk in 2026 is that accumulated pressure becomes thicker. Diplomatic pressure can come with economic pressure. Public pressure can come with policy decisions. and each new escalation cycle can shorten the pause that follows. The video does not need to claim what will definitely happen. It only needs to propose a scenario. When one hotspot repeatedly pulls more players into the arena, the probability of sliding into a broader confrontation increases. That is how it sets the ground for the next countdown section. The video presents Gaza as a clear example of an escalation loop. A military campaign unfolds. Casualties rise quickly. Then international pressure arrives. When that pressure becomes strong enough, a ceasefire is introduced like a release valve. Aid is discussed. Certain activities loosen. But then, with a single new incident, the loop starts again from the beginning. In the video's telling, the notable point is not only the fighting, it is the rhythm, the short pauses. And with each collapse, trust in a durable ceasefire drops another notch. When trust drops, the parties are more likely to return to harder reflexes, and that makes the loop easier to accelerate. From there, the 2026 forecast is framed in if-then terms. If 2025 already showed how fragile these agreements can be, then 2026 may be the year they become even harder to sustain, or break even faster. The video also suggests that Gaza is not only a battlefield, it is a trigger for moral debate, legal argument, aid politics, and international responsibility. That means each shift there can produce wider ripple effects. When multiple ripple effects overlap, overall pressure increases. And that is what the video treats as the foundation of higher risk in the following year. In this section, the video emphasizes the difference between a prolonged war and the risk of a war crossing a threshold. War, in the usual sense, is artillery, airstrikes, losses, and numbers that climb over time. But rumors of war, as the video uses the phrase, create a constant feeling of uncertainty, especially when tied to weapons of mass destruction. One hardline statement can shake markets and diplomacy. One report of missile deployments can make ordinary people feel as if the future is under a question mark. The video uses Ukraine to describe that atmosphere, not only because the fighting remains intense, but because escalation language gives the entire story a tone of "no one knows the stopping point." From there, the 2026 forecast is framed as a scenario of fatigue and error. When a war drags on, the margin for error grows. A rushed decision, a retaliatory strike on the wrong target, a misread signal. The video does not say 2026 will certainly explode. It says 2026 may be more dangerous because prolonged tension thins the safety buffer. And when the buffer is thin, one wrong step can produce consequences far beyond the original calculation. This becomes the bridge the video uses to move toward alliances and other hotspots in the countdown. The video uses the conflict along Israel's northern border to illustrate a different kind of escalation. Here, the story is not just a two-party confrontation. It is a proxy model. An armed group strikes, a state responds, and behind that are sources of technological, weapons, and logistical support. The video highlights technology to sharpen the sense of a new era: autonomous weapons, drones, targeting systems. This makes the tempo of conflict faster and the level of destruction potentially larger in a shorter span of time. When speed rises, the space for negotiation shrinks. And when consequences spill into civilian infrastructure, political pressure across the region intensifies. The 2026 forecast in this frame focuses on chain reaction. If Israel-Hezbollah tension continues, the larger risk is that broader actors are pulled in. A strike that crosses a threshold can trigger responses from multiple directions. As responses spread, a conflict can shift from a hotspot to a front. The video does not need to confirm the outcome. It emphasizes the condition. When supply lines, technology, and alliances are already present, the likelihood of a wider confrontation rises in the following year. The Damascus section is told as a story of threshold, a city with a long history, a country that has been unstable for years. But what makes the story stand out is the signal that the center of power can be directly impacted. The video lays out the sequence: internal instability, to regional conflict, to outside intervention. When those three layers stack, the risk range widens sharply. A weakened country has less ability to absorb additional shocks, and a shock to infrastructure or governing institutions creates openings that other forces can exploit, making the situation harder to control. The 2026 forecast here is a forecast of breakpoint. If 2025 showed Damascus being touched, then 2026 may be the year impacts repeat, or tension expands, pushing the city closer to a larger collapse scenario. The video treats this as a straight line of logic. The more parties view Syria as an arena of interests, the higher the escalation odds. And when interests overlap, short-term calculations can generate long-term consequences. That is how the video uses Damascus to connect back to the broader picture of a multi-point crisis in 2026. When discussing large-scale fires, the video focuses on two things. One is material scale: burned acreage, homes destroyed, economic damage, and duration. The other is social sensation: skies changing color, ash falling, mass evacuations, and the reality that a modern city can still be overwhelmed by nature. In this telling, disaster is not only catastrophe, it is a stress test of the system. When power grids, transportation, relief operations, and information channels all strain at once, one thing becomes clear. Modern systems are powerful, but also vulnerable when multiple shocks hit together. The video's 2026 forecast rests on the idea of frequency and overlap. If 2025 already produced disasters large enough to shake confidence, then 2026 may be more dangerous if disasters coincide with conflict and economic strain. When shocks overlap, government and social response capacity gets stretched thin. The video does not need to assign disasters to who. It stresses the consequence. Disasters shake the foundations of daily life. And when daily life shakes, people become more susceptible to fear, extremism, or acceptance of stronger control solutions. This serves as the bridge into sections about scarcity and social fracture. In the Sudan section, the video portrays scarcity as a direct outcome of prolonged war. Fighting destroys agriculture, blocks aid routes, displaces people, and supply collapses. When supply collapses, prices rise. And when prices rise to the point that a day's work buys only a fraction of a meal, society enters a rationed survival phase. The video uses a blunt image. Bread becomes the unit of crisis. No complex statistics are required. A simple comparison between wages and portions is enough to show the severity. The 2026 forecast here centers on spillover. Food crises rarely stay inside borders. Refugees move. Prices hit neighboring regions. Aid systems overload. And when scarcity persists, societies become more willing to accept harder, more controlled distribution mechanisms. The video suggests a scenario. The more places fall into scarcity, the more likely who gets prioritized, who gets excluded, becomes the dominant mindset. And once a society enters that logic, political decisions become sharper and more hostile. That is how the video connects famine to the sections about perilous times and the collapse of empathy. The video presents Myanmar as an example of two crisis layers overlapping. The first layer is social violence. When internal war drags on, moral norms erode. Cruelty can be used as a tool, then gradually normalized. The video highlights the collapse of empathy as the most recognizable sign of a society entering a dark phase. The second layer is natural disaster. When a major earthquake strikes, it does not only kill, it destroys homes, roads, hospitals, and removes the last points of support for people already trapped in hardship. This convergence creates a suffocating impression. Fleeing violence does not spare you from fire and smoke. The 2026 forecast here is not a prediction of one specific incident. It is a prediction about the double crisis pattern. When a fragile state is hit by a major disaster, relief needs spike while relief capacity collapses. That can set a precedent for other crises. The video implies that 2026 becomes more alarming if more places around the world fall into similar conditions. Conflict plus disaster plus system breakdown. And when those conditions appear in many points at once, the world is not just busy. The world is pulled into delayed responses, resource shortages, and difficulty maintaining stability. The final section pulls the pieces into a larger forecast for 2026. It uses the South China Sea as a symbol of roots and barriers. When maritime collisions and large-scale exercises appear, the video interprets them as signals of long-term strategic competition, not isolated incidents. In this framing, the barrier is no longer a river in an ancient image, but shipping lanes and control space. When one side tries to expand control over routes, the other increases military presence to balance it. Step by step, alert levels rise through small increments. The video uses that gradual rise to talk about a way being prepared. From that strategic baseline, the 2026 forecast is intensified by two ideas. One is the naming of linkages among major powers, described as a kind of interest alignment that can polarize the world further. The other is the sense of a time window, as the video raises the 2025 to 2030 frame as a sensitive period and places 2026 near the center of that window. Here, what matters in the video scenario is not certainty. What matters is the countdown feeling it constructs. More hotspots, more linkages, more escalation cycles, and fewer pauses. If 2025 is presented as the year signs became denser, then 2026 is forecast as the year those signs may intersect more forcefully. And when lines intersect, risk increases not in a straight line, but through compounding effects.